So one of the biggest debates in the 40k fandom in recent years is in regards to how long a Space Marine can live for, specifically as to whether or not they have an indefinite or finite lifespan. Now, personally, I always found the answer to this question to be pretty clear-cut, given that various iterations of Codex Blood Angels, even as recently as 8th edition, have said the following on the matter.
Physically, the Blood Angels are among the longest lived of all the Space Marine chapters. One of the peculiarities about their aberrant gene seed is that it has vastly increased the lifespan of those who bear it, so it is not unheard of for Blood Angels to live for 1,000 years. Indeed, the current commander of the chapter, Dante, is known to have lived for 1,100 years, and is almost certainly far older. These vastly extended lifespans allow the Blood Angels to perfect their techniques in art as well as in war. They have centuries in which to perfect their disciplines to which they turn their minds. This accounts for the fact that the Blood Angels' armor and banners are amongst the most ornate in all the Space Marines.
Seems simple enough. The Blood Angels, as a quirk of their gene seed, have a longer lifespan than the average Space Marine, which pretty much confirms that they can theoretically die of old age. It's kind of ironic really, considering that according to the short story Sins of My Brothers, the Angels Resplendent, even prior to becoming rebranded as the Angels Penitent, was stated to have lifespans that were shorter than the average Space Marine. And they're a Blood Angel successor chapter, so I guess that a shorter lifespan is just a quirk of their particular gene seed stocks? I don't know. But the real reason for this debate appears to come from the novel Horus Rising, which states the following.
There was an irony, of course. To all intents and purposes, and by every measurement known to the gene scientists and genetologists, the Astartes, like the Primarchs, were immortals. Age would not wither them, nor bring them down. They would live forever, 5,000 years, 10,000, beyond even that into some unimaginable millennium, except for the Scythe of War.
Now, because of this, a lot of people have taken this to mean that Space Marines have been retconned to be biologically immortal for all intents and purposes. But there's one important piece of information that I don't think a lot of people are taking into account, and that's the fact that the events of Horus Rising take place during the events of the Great Crusade. Now, granted, it was the later years of the Great Crusade, but at this particular point in time, the oldest Space Marine is going to be, at most, what, 200 years and change? Maybe 300 years at a pinch? Considering that, some Space Marines were created during the later years of the Terran Unification Wars, but aside from them, no Space Marine at this point in time is going to be older than 300. And from the Space Marines' point of view, they probably do think they are biologically immortal because, hey, 300 years, that's a long time by human standards. And no one has seen the full extent of just how long a Space Marine can live for, because again, the oldest Space Marine at this point in time is about 300 at the very most. It's not like in later years where you get guys like Maximus Thane or Commander Dante or T. Kaharangi, guys who live for well over 1,000 years. So again, during the time frame of Horus Rising, yeah, they probably do think they're biologically immortal. In fact, pretty much everyone probably thinks they're biologically immortal. But we know Space Marines can age, because, Commander Dante is a prime example of this. As detailed within his novel, he's grown to be, pretty much withered in appearance, which is why he wears his, Mask of Sanguinius Stardust features from everyone else. I mean, even Lionel Johnson, the Primarch of the Dark Angels, after he returned to 40k, was shown to have aged considerably between his appearances in 30k and 40k. So, if a Primarch can age, a Space Marine definitely can. And even then you got guys like Barabbas Dantioch, who was shown to have aged considerably after being exposed to a Hrudzentropic field, resulting in him being aged by approximately 3,000 years. Now granted, with that one you could argue, well, that doesn't count because it was artificial aging, so okay, you know what, fair enough. But it doesn't change the fact that Commander Dante and Lionel Johnson have both physically aged. Even Sigismund was shown to have physically aged, during the events of Black Legion. So Space Marines have been shown that they can indeed suffer from the effects of old age, which in turn would imply that they can indeed die from old age, assuming that they don't die in battle first. Now granted, a Space Marine living that long is going to be an incredibly rare occurrence because, a Space Marine's life is pretty much only war. They are pretty much destined to die in battle. But if one doesn't die in battle, well, then it's pretty much confirmed that they will indeed die from old age eventually. The only real question at this point is how long will they truly live for? Commander Dante is shown to be physically, by the standards of Space Marines, pretty frail and pretty slow. And he's about, 1600 years old? Maybe a bit older? So, let's say between 2,000 to 3,000 years would be like the lifespan of a Space Marine depending upon their chapter. That seems to be a logical assumption to make. Oh, and before anyone asks in regards to dreadnoughts, dreadnoughts are a special case because a dreadnought is literally a life support machine with machine guns. Well, maybe not machine guns, maybe it's a giant fist, maybe it's a missile launcher, maybe it's a giant laser cannon, who knows, but my point is, a dreadnought is a weaponized life support machine, so different rules apply. And even then, in a lot of instances, the sarcophagi, containing a Space Marine of a dreadnought is disconnected and placed in stasis, though you do get some rare instances like with the Anchorite of Almace, who was, pretty much active all the time, it's implied. But then again, he was in a Contemptor, and Contemptors have different rules because they are far more sophisticated. It's part of the reason why, Chaos Space Marines in turn within a Contemptor don't go insane. But I digress. Oh, and to anyone wondering about the Chaos Space Marines, warp space shenanigans. Because the majority of the traitor legions tend to dwell in places where real space and the warp overlap, which means they're affected by the time-distorting properties of warp space, which is why they're able to still exist today. Because, a day, week, or month within the warp would equate to something like, a decade, a century, or a millennia in real space. So, that's why they're able to still survive to this day. Now, a Space Marine has been shown to be capable of, for want of a better term, extending their lifespan by undergoing a Susan membrane coma. Now, the Susan membrane is a specialist organ that allows a Space Marine to undergo a state of suspended animation, which basically means that all of their biological functions are basically paused for the duration of this coma. And I'm pretty sure a Susan membrane coma has been stated that it can last up to about 400 years or so. So if a Space Marine enters a Susan membrane coma, they could theoretically emerge from it, go to the toilet, have something to eat, and then potentially go back into it, which means they could theoretically extend their lifespans by, thousands of years, potentially. But the practicality of doing so would be questionable at best. But those are just my thoughts on the matter. So what do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching!